Welcome to Gospel Greetings number 95. We have been talking about how to hear God's voice. 2 weeks ago, we discussed His Word, the Bible. Last week, we discussed silence and solitude from Psalm 46:10, where He says, "Be still and know that I am God." We talked about being still, being silent, getting solitude and retreat times as ways to slow down our pace and to hear God. This week, we continue looking at ways to hear God's voice. We're going to discuss surrendering from Psalm 37, verses 3 to 8, which say, "Trust the Lord and do good things. Be happy with the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Entrust your ways to the Lord. Trust Him, and He will act on your behalf. He will make your righteousness shine like a light. Surrender yourself to the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Let go of anger and leave rage behind. Fret not thyself." In this Psalm of David, he contrasts a life of surrender and trust in the Lord with a life of self-directedness, drivenness, and fretting. I love the King James Version of verses 1 and 8. They say, "Fret not thyself." Quit fretting. Quit being angry and bitter about what someone has done. But God is so gracious. He doesn't just say to us, "Stop it." He shows us how. Look at verses 3 to 8. There are several action word commands in these verses. Verse 3 says, "Trust the Lord, do good things." Verse 4, "Be happy," or delight yourself in the Lord. Verse 5, "Entrust your ways to God and trust in Him." Verse 7, "Surrender and wait patiently." And verse 8, finally, "Let go of anger," or "Fret not thyself." Then in these same verses, God gives promises to the outcomes if we will do these things. Look at verse 4. It says, God will give you the desires of your heart. Verse 5 says He will act on your behalf. Then one of the great promises in verse 6, He says, He will make your righteousness shine like a light. God is promising to bless us, help us, and act on our behalf, and speak to us, of course, if we will only surrender to His will and His ways, to really trust Him. And this is where the problems come for me. I like to do things my way and on my timeline. I will push things ahead before God has really said to move ahead. You may have some issues like this as well, and maybe some of your issues relate to circumstances. You may be fretting yourself or what's happening in our world, restrictions, supply chain stuff, or the success of a competitor. You see, many times we cannot hear God's voice because we stubbornly, obstinately hold on to our will, our way, in our timing. Yet God implores us through David in this psalm to surrender, trust, entrust, commit, and wait for Him. As we do these things and align ourselves with God's will, it frees Him to speak to us and make our righteousness shine like the noonday sun. Rick Warren has an excellent take on surrendering to improve your communication with God. He says surrendering your life means following God's lead without knowing where He's sending you, waiting for God's timing without knowing when it'll come, expecting a miracle without knowing how God will provide, trusting God's purpose without understanding all the circumstances, and letting go and letting God. Instead of trying harder, you trust more. Great perspective from Pastor Rick. You see, surrender really is the great overlooked way to help you hear God's voice. Bless you, brothers.